Well, Halloween today, so you know it's time to talk about our favorite Halloween candies. Jake Butt, I'll give you the floor.
So I went through and this one stands out. And I have to admit, because when I was a kid, I hated Almond Joys. And then I got older and I said, I love chocolate-covered almonds. Then I put it together, I said, wait a second, why'd I hate Almond Joys all along? So I'm going with Almond Joys, chocolate-covered raisins.
Oh, man.
I think I got those are my two best ones. I think I got a Reese's cup in there or something like that. But Almond Joys, man, you can't beat it. Doesn't get better than that.
All right, well, I'm allergic to two of the three. And chocolate-covered raisins, I mean, it's a little crazy, isn't it?
You got to try it, though. You got to try it. I'm telling you. I like,
crazy.
Yeah, chocolate-covered blank. That's what I like.
All right, okay, well.
What do you got?
Top of my list would be the Werther's Originals. Now, I know a lot of people think of their grandparents when they see these, and I understand why. You are immature if you don't believe that these are one of the top candies out there. They are sweet and delicious. We should all appreciate the Werther's. Also on my list, Tootsie Rolls. Who doesn't like a Tootsie Roll? They're delicious. And how about double bubble gum? Yeah, it might only get 30 seconds worth of good flavor out of it, but it's the best 30 seconds you'll ever experience, damn it.
You got a bad list, bro. I have to say, like, I'm gonna show you the way. My list, you got a bad list. I just want to say that. Tootsie Rolls?
They're
Tootsie
delicious.
Rolls?
They're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
A sleeper pick, huh?
Don't knock it till you try it.
All right. All right.
All right. Oh, man. Red corner, blue corner, right here on Stadium Spooky Edition. It is Halloween. We're nerds, so neither one of us dressed up, but we'll just take it from here. Again, my guy, Jake Butt, who was an all-time great at the University of Michigan, which is really hard to do, considering some of the great players that have played at that university.
And Joshua Perry, also an all-time great, a captain, and most importantly, national champion. They only hand one of those out a year at Ohio State. So excited to tackle this show with you, bro.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun, and we want to invite you all in as well. Certainly appreciate your participation, getting that YouTube chat once again. Should be popping today. You can talk about our favorite candies, which my list is unimpeachable. So if you want to argue, we can certainly do that. We also want you to scan that QR code on the screen. Question of the day, where would you rank Michigan in the CFP rankings, which come out this evening? We'll certainly have a conversation about that. But like I said, it is Halloween. And so in honor of the holiday, let's talk about nightmares. Maryland, first off, they did not win a singular game in the month of October. They're losers of 3 in a row. When will the nightmare end for Maryland?
You know, I think you're kind of in a nightmare at this point. I don't think it ends this weekend. I don't think they beat Penn State. You know, the nightmare started back this offseason with the expectations set ahead of them. You know, hey, Loxley said competing for a Big Ten championship. I thought, why not, man? I'll throw you in. You won't be a favorite. You can do it. And they looked like they were trending that way until they met Ohio State. And since then, one loss turned to 2 to 3. The team's struggling, and that schedule, that does not look too favorable down the stretch for the Terps.
No, I mean, you would have come in this year looking at them and said, okay, they're going to beat Nebraska, and that one's a toss-up. Certainly a game that they could lose. Rutgers,
great
surprisingly,
defense.
A game that they could lose as well. Now, they will probably be favored in both of those games. They should be able to get back on track. It's going to be a tough mountain to scale against Penn State. We'll talk about them here in a second. They're certainly not beating the Michigan Wolverines. So I'm not sure when this nightmare ends, but I know that Mike Loxley's probably looking in that locker room and saying that as much as they got beat by the other teams, they beat themselves as well.
Exactly.
You always talk about, you know, more games are lost than won in the game of college football, right? Like, teams go out there and they do things to hurt themselves. That's been Maryland's story.
That's been the nightmare for Loxley. I mean, it was like 4 straight weeks where he's saying clock management into half or at the end of the game. He's like waking up and he's saying the same thing the next week. And then that is a nightmare. So as you mentioned, JP, just can you fix some of those errors? Who knows? Maryland's good enough to win any of those games or a few of those games, but can you do it? That's the question.
Our guy Matt Goldman on YouTube is asking, where are their Halloween costumes? They're not here with us, so I mean, I can jump into one during the break if you'd like me to, but I don't know if Jake's got the same ability.
No, I don't. I didn't bring my khakis. Maybe if we put a block M, I could be Coach Harbaugh, but we're just going to pilot the show as is right now.
All right, so let's take it to Penn State. That's the team that Maryland plays this week. And for the Nittany Lions, a traditional football school, winning Big Ten championships has been a struggle for them. They've won just 2 titles since 2000, and one of those was a shared championship when will that nightmare end for Penn State?
Well, again, I think the nightmare, because you laid it out there, the Big Ten championships, that's the standard in the way the program views itself. And that's the way James Franklin has recruited well, right? Like they have players, they have guys. I think they believe every year, in particular, I thought they believed this year they could go do it, but they didn't do themselves any service losing to Ohio State, and it looks like the offense is really struggling. When the nightmare will end, and here's where I'm thinking. It's probably going to be going forward. And part of the reason we're adding 4 new brands to the conference, so that'll make things more challenging in some light.
Yep.
But the other light is they have no protected rivalries, so they won't have to play Ohio State and Michigan every single year. So maybe that helps them.
Yeah, I'm looking at that, and that should be something that helps. I think the way that the West Coast editions are playing this year makes you wonder, what their impact could be coming in next year. I have this thought about Penn State, and that I think they have made too much of the beating Ohio State and beating Michigan. And I know that James Franklin says we want to go 1-0 every week, but it almost felt like everything was tight for them. And maybe if you just play a little bit looser and just kind of let it fly when you play Ohio State and Michigan, you could have some more success, because nobody's ever great when they're playing tight.
That's an interesting dynamic, is the mental part of that. And you're tight when you do it just that week. Michigan had the beat Ohio period, but that was a year-long thing. I know Ohio State did the same thing for Michigan year-round. It's tight when it's a little unexpected and you do something you're not used to, which is put a bunch of emphasis on one singular game. I think that's a really good point, JP.
All right, and then finally, we got to get to the worst team in the conference, in my estimation. That is the Michigan State Spartans. When does their nightmare end?
This nightmare could end with a excellent hire, or this thing could go on for a long time. Did you see the speculation on social media yesterday?
Speculation.
I clicked on him. I said, this guy's got 300 followers. This has got to be a troll, right? I mean, this is they're talking 100 million. If they get Urban Meyer, the nightmare is over. But if they don't, and that's your expectation, the nightmare might live on, JP.
Yeah, I think they have to ace the hire. And I know people have looked at Mike Elko at Duke, and maybe some of the more recent performances, people are saying, maybe Duke's not the team, or Elko's not the coach, excuse me. Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, which I think they've done a great job. Jake Dickert over there at Washington State, who I think has done really well with the program. 2 of those programs that are really the second team of record in their state, and that's what Michigan State is. I think they have to embrace that, and they've been really good when they did embrace it, because you and I played against a bunch of Michigan State teams that had kids that were recruited out of Ohio and kids that were recruited out of Michigan that were overlooked by either one of those programs, Ohio State and Michigan, and all they ever wanted to do was beat the Buckeyes and beat the Wolverines, and they did a lot of that.
Leveraging that is what allowed D'Antonio to be so successful, taking the underrated guys, getting them to play angry, and going out to succeed. So we have a fun game in the spirit of the Halloween theme. We've put together some Franken athletes. Couple different categories. We're picking one from each side of the ball. JP, you're the defensive guru. You're a football guru in general, but your background's in defense. Can you lead us through your list? Who is your Franken athlete?
Yeah, I got a really good one. So the categories are IQ, toughness, stamina, strength, and speed. So for IQ, I'm going with Tyler Nubin, the safety out of Minnesota. When you watch him play the game, he is a guy who is effective at all levels of the defense. He's a good blitzer. He's great in run support. He's really good in the pass game. Watches a ton of tape. He's been able to take the football away. This is a guy who's in tune with everything that's going on, both for his defense and what the offense is trying to attack within his defense. He's my IQ guy. For toughness, I'm going Cal Halladay. He is a linebacker that does not wear gloves, right? That is a toughness guy. Nobody does that anymore. So Cal Halladay, tough dude. For my stamina, I am going JT Tuimoloau, in particular when he's playing against Penn State. That guy is the Nittany Lion killer. He is available to you all day and becomes better in the fourth quarter of those games. It's a wild trend for him. For my strength guy, Chris Jenkins, in the middle of the defense for Michigan, I think the guy he's a big dude, but he plays like a real big dude. And then finally for speed, Daquan Hardy is in the secondary for Penn State. Not a lot of people know him on defense, and I think we should take more of a look at him because he's a really good defender. He's an impact player on special teams, great in the return game. So I'm rolling with him.
Yeah, he does some really special things. Chris Jenkins was on Bruce Feldman's The Freaks list earlier this year. You got a good Franken athlete, and I love the fact that Nubin's the high IQ. you need to have a safety in a playmaking position with high IQ. And, of course, you go with the linebacker without any gloves. I followed some similar themes for mine.
All right.
So my categories were IQ, toughness, vision, hands, and speed. And to make sure you got I didn't go Marvin Harrison Jr. for every single category, though I did think about it. We will start with IQ.
Because he's a Franken athlete.
He's a Franken athlete in and of itself. But what about the Robin to his Batman? For IQ, I chose Emeka Egbuka.
Okay.
And a big reason is, think back to that Notre Dame game at the beginning of the year. Some of those big catches he had. Well, if you go look at the tape, look at how much of a feel he has running routes. He sits down in the zone and finds green grass as good as anyone. He understands leverage and route concepts as good as anyone. And he makes the plays very similar. Reminds me of a Jackson Smith and Jigba, where you can line him up all over the field, and he knows the way to win. There is an art to route running. Toughness, okay. I wanted to go Kyle Monungai, all right? I wanted to go Kyle Monungai. But I went with Mac Bredesen. Why? Because fullback is a dying breed. He's one of the best blocking tight ends and fullbacks in college football. An unsung hero that makes things go. Blake Corum with the vision. I think back to that Indiana play last year. Remember when he was boxed in by 4 defenders? Cuts backfield, Blake Corum. Of course, hands, Marvin Harrison Jr. Do we really need to explain that? He makes acrobatic catches every single week. Speed. Deion Burks.
That's a good pull.
Very good. Also, Bruce Feldman's Freakless. They told me when I was scouting their game week 1, he hit like 23 miles an hour on the GPS.
Dude's fast.
So he got a ticket in a school zone running around. He is explosive.
Imagine being able to run so fast that you could be ticketed in a school zone.
Think about that, right?
That is a cheat code within the game, and Deion Burks has played fantastically for Purdue early on. He just needs a little bit more help around him. All right, we're going to take our first break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Now, coming up, Jim Harbaugh. That man will say anything to avoid talking about the sign-stealing scandal. Hear what he had to say about houseplants? That's next here on Red Corner, Blue Corner.
All right, welcome back. Let's take a visit to the clock that runs year-round. Yes, we have a lot of football left to play, but we're officially under a month. 25 days, countdown to kickoff. Ohio State travels to Ann Arbor. Joshua, how are you feeling about this game?
You know, I think this one has the opportunity. I know people talked about the game like this last year. It's got the opportunity to be one of the more pivotal matchups in recent history, with kind of some of the scandals surrounding Michigan and Ryan Day. If he loses a third in a row, and if he's 11-1 after this year, right? Like, you would say, all things given, where his roster was at compared to previous years, but he still lost to Michigan.
How crazy is the standard there in Columbus? Sky high, impossibly high, right? And that adds to the fun of this game.
We should have the conversation about what it's like living in Columbus and
it's a good point.
Being a part of the Buckeyes. It's crazy. But it's time for a mic check, and we're going to actually take it to Ann Arbor for this one. Jim Harbaugh had an interesting way to say how adaptable his team is. Let's listen.
You know, it's a team that understands and prepares, and whatever the situation. It's not always going to be 72 and zero humidity either. I mean, there's going to be, could be cold, could be wet, could be hot. So they don't have to have everything, you know, set perfect.
On the left, Isaiah.
They're like field corn, as opposed to being a houseplant.
JJ McCarthy said last week.
Nothing against houseplants. They have their function. They can be beautiful in the home. They can bring great beauty and value to a home. But the field corn, just drop a seed in a crack of a sidewalk and it'll burrow down and come up with any energy that it can find, and then rise up in a stalk-like fashion and just start producing. I'd say that's what our team's more like.
Drop on the sidewalk, you find any energy it needs, and it'll rise up in stalk-like fashion. It's field corn.
Makes complete sense. You followed that whole thing, right? Like, that makes complete sense,
yeah,
right?
It doesn't have to be 72 and humid. It doesn't need perfect conditions. You just drop it wherever.
Nothing against houseplants, though. Nothing against houseplants.
Beauty and value to a home, as Jim Harbaugh just said. It sounded like he was describing a weed, honestly, like an infestation of crabgrass or something like that.
Well, is that in the way he was describing corn too? Infectious, right? One seed turns into a whole field of corn, and that produces a field of crops. Corn, we use corn for a bunch of things, for oil, for gas, for whatever.
Why use the term stalk-like fashion instead of just saying a stalk?
That to me, here's what I'll take that. That to me tells he was speaking from the heart. That was coming out naturally as it went.
What was the best speech that Jim Harbaugh ever gave you that kind of falls into this category of a little bit weird?
Yeah, he gave a couple, but there was one where, pre-game, someone said, Jim takes the common and makes it uncommon. Someone said, hey, less is more, and Jim overheard this as we were going into our pre-game speech, and he had a speech and he ripped it up, and he gave us like a 10-minute dialogue on how less is not more. That is a lie. Only more is more. You play more football to get better at football. You meet longer. And basically, though the whole world thinks less is more, that's not the way Jim Harbaugh thinks. More is more. Field corn.
It's interesting stuff to me. More is more. I agree with him on that. I know where people are trying to get at with less is more. I want to check in on this poll real quick. I think the results are pretty interesting. Where would Michigan rank in the CFP? And then we'll get out of here. A lot of you are saying first, which I think makes a lot of sense. There are also a lot of people saying fourth, which I also think makes a lot of sense. So that'll kind of tell us what the committee's thinking, but we're going to get into that after this break.
Those are the two options. Are they the best because they've looked the best, or are they the fourth because of their resume? That is the interesting piece of that. And guess what? We're going to bring in our guys. It's time for the conference clash. We're revealing here at Stadium's first batch of playoff rankings. That's on the other side of the break.
back on Red Corner, Blue Corner for a conference clash. We're going to bring in our guys. We got AJ McCarron joining the show, and we got T-Bob Hebert dressed up as a wizard. He was the only one, I guess, who read the email that said to put the costume on. I absolutely love it. I appreciate the fact that you want to make things fun around here. Not a ton of time to get into it. We can get into it on your guys' side of the show because we got the first batch of playoff rankings that will be released this evening, and we put our own committee together over here at Stadium, and we have some playoff rankings to reveal. Now, I don't know if everybody was on the same page and went based off of their opinion or went based off of what they think the committee will do. So this ought to be interesting to see. So time to reveal our top 6. At number 1, we have the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is an interesting start. What are we thinking here, guys?
Well, obviously, we required the need of someone learned and wise on this committee. And look, we talked about it yesterday. I decided to honor resume over everything at this point. Georgia and Michigan will have a chance to prove themselves. Nobody else has the resume that Ohio State has right now.
AJ?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in your number one. There's a reason preseason rankings and you're number one until somebody knocks you off. So they're undefeated so far this year. I still had Georgia at 1.
I don't mind this. I don't mind it because though I don't think they've looked the best every single game and it feels like they have a couple leaks, they have 2 of the best wins in college football right now, and the name of the game is winning. They've proved themselves. Yeah,
I'm leaning resume here, and I understand how we get here. I also do believe that Michigan is the best team in the country, and I would have Georgia right behind them. So I don't know if this is a measure of if we think that they would win that game, but if we're going based off of certain criteria that the committee says they like, I understand how we got here. Now, we got to check in on number 2 here, and it is Florida State. And I think this falls into a similar resume conversation, but the more you start to look at Florida State, the more you question the resume. LSU, still a really good win for them, but Clemson is a team that is 500, 4 losses by the end of October, and Duke is a team where the wheels have fallen off. So what do we think about Florida State at 2?
I don't like it one bit.
Yeah, go ahead, AJ. Sorry.
I don't like it one bit. Listen, I think Florida State's best win this year is Duke, and we're talking about a school that is known for basketball. So, and that's not taken away from Duke this year, but I didn't have Florida State in my top 4 at all.
All right.
Excuse me, AJ. Florida State's best win is LSU, and you better watch your mouth because come Saturday, that LSU win may appreciate even more in value. Okay. We got Steve Sarkisian out here like, we beat Alabama. We should be ranked so high. Well, guess what? If LSU beats Alabama this Saturday, well, Florida State wins. Look, I don't know if I would have had Florida State at 2, but again, I think they're more proven than the Georgia-Michigan mix, and they are starting to get hot. They're starting to take care of business. Keon Coleman's starting to dominate week in and week out. I love Jordan Travis. Like, they are a complete team to me. I don't hate it here.
Yeah, this will be one of the ones I'm looking out for. I think Florida State, some parts of their defense give me a little bit of trouble, but that offense is absolutely ridiculous. Let's go back to these rankings here so we can check out who's in at number 3. And that is the Georgia Bulldogs. I know AJ is over there seething right now because of how low Georgia is. I think there's 2 parts of this for me. I look number 1 at resume, and certainly the win over Kentucky and the one over Florida make their resume look much better. Those aren't necessarily world beaters. Also, I think people look at the fact that they struggled with the South Carolina early on. They struggled with an Auburn and say that it's a really good team, but maybe not the dominant team that we've seen the last 2 years.
I think that Georgia is starting to find themselves. It's what championships team do during turkey season. I think they're getting better and better. I still would have put Washington over them because I think Washington over Oregon is one of the most impressive wins of the entire season. But I would have had Georgia in my top 4 for the reasons that AJ said earlier. I mean, they are the defending champs. But again, but Josh, I want to be clear. I am not impressed with the Florida and Kentucky wins. Those mean next to nothing to me. Those are 6-6 teams.
I'm kind of there with you, but you got to give credit where credit's due because they were blowout victories for sure, and that's hard to do. Finally, we'll get you the rest of the rankings here. So at number 4, we have University of Michigan. Then we have Washington 5, Oregon 6. Michigan deserves to be in the top 4. Everybody's going to talk about the resume. I would actually put Oregon in front of Washington. I know that they played, but Oregon certainly, the further we get from that game, I think we can relitigate it many ways to say that they were probably the better team playing on the road with some questionable coaching decisions. So what do we think as a overall here?
AJ, you go first. Wait, hold on. Here we go. Never mind. Time to switch it over to rivals down south. AJ, biggest shock in this stadium top 6 that we just looked at right then?
For me, well, I mean, of course, Florida State being at 2. For me, it was a fight between, do I put Michigan at 4 or do I put Florida State at 4 for myself? Michigan hasn't played anybody. So, I mean, we can say they have the best team in the country just off of how they've looked playing, nobodies. But until they play a Penn State or Ohio State, like until they play somebody that's actually worth something, I can't put them in the top 4. I think Washington has looked better. I think they're one of the top 4 teams in the country. I had them at number 3. I think Oregon's on the cusp of being right there. I think Oregon, should definitely have more talks about being up there, especially in the 5 spot. But for me, Michigan and Florida State, I just was going back and forth on who to put at 4 and who to put at 5.
I think red corner, blue corner boys, explain to me the Washington disrespect here. Okay, because I see a complete team that has one of the longest winning streaks in the entire country. They went 11-2 last year. They won in Eugene last year. They won at home this year over Oregon. They got elite quarterback play, 3 great receivers. Why do the Huskies not deserve to be in the top 4 right now?
May I?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So I played for a program in Ohio State, and I watched early on. I know the AP poll and the college football playoff are very different mechanisms here. I watched the team get a win on the road in conference in week 1 by 20 points, and people said that they were a bad football team. And so Washington plays in Arizona State in a game that they probably could have lost, and we're just going to act like that data point doesn't exist. What Stanford did to their defense, the amount of points that Stanford put up on them, and I'm supposed to act like that didn't exist? I totally get where we're at and Michael Penix Jr. in that offense and all the things that they have done. I think that their wide receiver room is as good as anybody in the country. I also think that we have to look at the idea that they have stumbled against lower competition, even though they may have the best win in the country. Those things have to matter too.
Teams evolve throughout the year too. Like we have to reserve the right to acknowledge that as a true statement. I think Georgia, as you mentioned earlier, T-Bob, they're finding their footing as they're replacing some key pieces, including their quarterback. My general thoughts on this list is I can already see contradiction forming, because if you're saying you value resume and having Ohio State at 1, then sure, you probably should have Washington in Michigan out. But by that note, how do you have Georgia ahead of Michigan? Because you look at their strength of schedules, though Georgia may have, a 1 or 2 wins that are better, Michigan's been more dominant consistently throughout the season. So you can see already, is there a little bit of contradiction? What is it? Is it resume or is it eye test?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that was the biggest kind of sticking point with me, was separating Michigan and Georgia. And I engaged in an ancient technique that my father taught me, and it's called just feeling it in your balls. And at the end of the day, my intuition, my gut just told me that maybe through a mixture of the past 2 championships, Kirby Smart, whatever it is, my gut just told me that Georgia decided to barely edge out Michigan there for 4.
Hey, how do the SEC boys feel that there's 2 Big Ten teams competing for a national title right now? We got you 2-1 as it stands right now.
No. Look.
Yeah, I mean, but if Michigan loses to Ohio State, then I think just based off their strength of schedule, they're out. I don't see them being a 1-loss team, talks being in the college. But this is the issue I have with the College Football Playoff Committee. okay, is we based the wins during the season off of how teams are ranked at the end of the year. Well, then what's the point of preseason rankings?
We shouldn't do them.
What's the point of building up
That's
the
a
hype?
great point.
Yes,
we shouldn't
do them because you play teams when you play them based off their ranking then, right? And we've all played football enough to know if we have a bad loss, say our team had a bad loss during the year, that can affect a team to where they fall apart for the remainder of the year. Or a win can build a team up to where there's something special throughout the year. So why do we have preseason rankings? Why do we have in-season rankings then? We shouldn't have them. If this is going to be how they decide on who should make the playoffs and who shouldn't, you can't go based off of what somebody's record is at the end of the year. You can't do it.
I'm with you. I think
what?
every data point,
We do it, boys.
we got to look
Go
at
ahead.
individually. That's it.
Here's the thing, though. We do it for what we're doing right now. TV.
Sure.
It's sexy. It's fun. We got top 10. Like you put LSU in the top 10 in these playoff rankings. You got a top 10 matchup going down in T-Town this weekend. And I want to talk about spoilers coming up here. Who could maybe play the role of spoiler? But first, let's let the red corner, blue corner boys go bye-bye. Thank you so much. We'll see you for a full college football power hour to react to the playoff rankings tonight. Y'all take it easy, and we'll see you tomorrow, guys.
All right.
All right.
Appreciate it, fellas.
All right, AJ, and look, we will transition here to Jaden Daniels versus Jalen Milroe. You see the statistical comparison of the two quarterbacks right here, and look, it appears like there's a massive gulf on paper. However, these are the top two rated quarterbacks in the SEC. If you just look at college football quarterback rating, it's not Carson Beckett, too. It's not Brady. It's Jalen Milroe. How do you score this one from a surface level standpoint here, AJ?
Well, listen, we can talk about the QB matchup and all that, which is going to be key, right? Can Jalen Milroe not turn the ball over? He's had some bad interceptions in the red zone in costly, moments of games, especially the last couple of weeks. He's got to stop turning the ball over in the red zone versus a struggling LSU defense throughout the whole year, right? So you can't have crazy turnovers. The big matchup that I think this game is based off of is Matt House, the defensive coordinator at LSU, versus Kevin Still.
Mm-hmm.
Can one of those guys get their defense to not give up big plays, right? Because Bama's offense has went through lulls and struggled, and what's helped them out? It's throw it deep, let's take some shots, right? Let our guys run under it. So can LSU keep Alabama from having explosive plays, or can Bama's defense, somewhat calm and kind of, contain Jaden Daniels a little bit in their explosive offense and the weapons they have out wide?
So this is where it gets interesting to me, AJ, because this kind of gets into a bigger question. In football, we always just boil it down to it's about the two quarterbacks. But kind of part and parcel with what you're getting at here, is Alabama's success actually dependent on Jalen Milroe, or is he just a bigger piece of a larger puzzle that needs to happen for Alabama to win? Like, when I look at this Alabama team, yes, Milroe is explosive. The yards per attempt is over 10. That's the main reason why he's so highly rated, despite not having massive volume and an interesting touchdown to pick ratio. But I look at a team that came back and dominated Tennessee in the second half, in which they only threw the ball 7 times. And we all know if you're going against an elite offense, what do? You try to keep that offense off the field. So it becomes a situation like, and even if you want to help out Kevin Steele, keep Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and all those weapons, keep them on the bench. Is Alabama's best path to victory actually controlling this game through running the ball?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Tommy Rees is going to have to establish a run game early in the game. Like, I don't care if it's, some RPO situations where – Jalen has options to throw it quick and get it out if the backer bumps out of the box and the run's not there, or if it's zone reads for him to where you can use his athletic ability and what he does best is run. But you have to establish some sort of run game. And yes, T-Bob, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, Bama is going to have to play clock management throughout this whole game. You can't allow You can't have fast 3-and-outs and allow LSU's explosive offense to get back out on the field, and they have a big play, and all of a sudden you're down 7-0. Then you go back out and you try to get back in a passing rhythm or whatever, and you do the same thing. You don't establish, running any clock off, and then you turn it back over to them, and they go back down and score quick again. Now you're down 14 or 10. Like, that's how a game just turns quick on you, and you lose control of it. So, yes, Bama's going to have to establish a run game and eat up some clock.
So it is interesting, though, because we look at an LSU defense that is objectively one of the worst in the entire country. And now they lose an interior All-American on the defensive line, Mekhi Wingo. He's announced out for the season. Through a mixture of injury and suspension, AJ, LSU is down to 3 true freshman corners and a safety turned corner who ain't that good at corner, and Sage Ryan. And so, there's also insecurities on the LSU defensive side of the ball that, although this Alabama offense hasn't necessarily been overwhelming, LSU hadn't really been able to stop anybody. So there's even a thought on the LSU side that maybe they too want to try to run it and control it and not allow explosive plays, because right now I think LSU fans' fear is that the offense is going to enter something like they felt in the Ole Miss game, where any negative play feels like a death sentence. This is an offense that just feels like it has no margin of error right now. And I would ask you, as someone who's played in a ton of different offenses at a ton of different levels, how do you operate when it feels like every time you don't score, you've automatically cost yourself the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough because you feel like even when you're playing with a slight lead, it feels like you're 10, 14 points behind, because there's no margin for error at all, right? Every time you get the ball, you have to be perfect. You have to go down and end on some type of points, whether it's a touchdown or a field goal, right? Which makes it tough and it makes it tough on a play caller. Because now the play caller feels like, well, maybe on 2nd and 1, instead of taking a shot right here, like a lot of offensive coordinators like to, because worst case scenario, you're back in 3rd and 1 situation. But now it's like, all right, well, should I just try to run the ball and get the first down to keep the chains moving? And then you get stuffed, and now you're on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1 again. So now it's like, okay, well, we just got stuffed on 2nd and 1. Do I go back to the run, or now do I have some type of quick game concept or a little rollout bootleg or something? So you start to second guess, and then that just trickles down throughout the whole offense, right? But if you're LSU's defense with a young secondary, it's what you have to say going into this game is make Alabama sustain drives. That's one thing they've struggled at, is sustaining drives throughout the whole series, right? So make them sustain drives. Don't allow the big play, the pass play that gets them going, that they had coming out in the second half against Tennessee when they were struggling the whole first half. You can't allow those big explosive plays in the pass game.
Still to come on Rivals Down South, Dabo Swinney takes on Tyler from Spartanburg, and Lane Kiffin taking more shots. Love to see it. Coming up here on Rivals. Welcome back to Rivals Down South. And it was a coach down south, Dabo Swinney, who has taken over the headlines, as he says in his coach's show, quote, talking to a caller that had criticized him very heavily, quote, "You're part of the problem. The appreciation, the expectation is greater than the appreciation. But all this bull crap you're thinking, all these narratives you read, listen, man, you can have your opinion all you want. You can apply for the job, and good luck to you." So Dabo basically saying that, Clemson used to be great because they used to appreciate wins. Now it's all expectation. And look, I kind of loved some of this from Dabo, AJ, because I kind of liked when he went on his rant and put it out on the table and was like, what have I done? I've never failed anything. I'm the man. Like, I kind of like that. The problem is, at certain points, Dabo wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants the rewards of great success. He wants the $11.5 million. He wants the love. He wants the praise, but he doesn't want the consequences, the expectations that come with it. And that, to me, is where it starts to break down for Dabo. Like, could you ever imagine Coach Saban saying something like this publicly?
No. I mean, Saban wouldn't even, if anything, he'd have a smart little sly comment back to him, but he wouldn't allow that caller to feel like he got under their skin at all. Listen, this is the thing with Dabo that aggravates me. It's the last couple of years since they've been struggling, right? Is Dabo's become so sensitive and so and worries so much about the opinion of everybody else outside of the building. Like, what are you doing? You're a national championship coach that has had great success there, and I think he only hurts his resume for, like, if he ever did when Saban retires, if he ever wanted that Alabama job. Like, I don't know, because if you can't handle the pressure at Clemson, there's no way in hell you could handle the pressure at Alabama. and so I just think this is salty. Like, stop worrying about the opinions of everybody else. Like, care about the people inside that building, inside the organization, the people that you see day in and day out, and stop worrying about everything else. I don't understand it.
It is a bit interesting. And it's funny that you mentioned kind of Clemson as a foil against Alabama, because how Dabo got to this point is almost born entirely out of what a unique situation Clemson was and is, right? Where they weren't used to being a perennial power. They didn't have the consistent national championships. He did not come into, like, when he got the job, the expectation level was not at LSU, where it's, okay, the last three national champion teams, coaches won national championships, you have to too. Alabama, you have Bear Bryant and Nick Saban, right? He came up in a friendly environment and he made it great, but it doesn't appear like he wants to deal with everything that comes with that success. He just needs to go back to the old saying. I'm not trying to trigger any Giants fans here, but Lions don't concern themselves with the opinions of sheep. Like, what the hell are you doing yelling at Tyler from Spartanburg, Dabo? Just go win. Try to avoid going 4-5 against Notre Dame this weekend. That's what you need to be worried about. And one of my other favorite quotes from this week, our old friends back at it again, once again, AJ, Lane Kiffin. And this time, this is wonderful, because Lane really has studied at the feet of Saban about how to deliver things from a presentation standpoint. But listen to see if you can catch on to a couple of the not so subtle shots at Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M here.
I need, I guess, 3 straight years to be in the top 10, but it doesn't matter to me except for what do you finish. So it's good that it brings attention to the program, and to be able to do that, especially as you're going against a program that normally you would think would be the team in the top 10 3 years in a row with their roster. That says a lot about our players, our coaches, our fans.
Oh, my God. Simply fantastic. So Lane asked about Ole Miss, which, again, let's be clear. And Lane would go on to say that he heard that Jimbo say that the Aggies' goal is to get bowl eligible this year. So really just tightening the screws. I would say this. Lane Kiffin's exactly right. Ole Miss has no business in modern college football being top 10 3 years in a row. I don't care if they don't finish there. That's still a hell of a job by Lane. And Texas A&M has no excuse to not be top 10. They have all the money. They've got the talent. They've got the geography. They've got the fan buy-in. They've got the facilities. Like, Jimbo Fisher is doing a master class of bad right now in College Station, and I love that Lane's kind of calling him out for it subtly.
Oh, 100%. Listen, usually when you go rob a bank, and I've never robbed a bank, but I've seen movies where it's happened, the robber always wears a mask. Jimbo ran straight into the bank with no mask on whatsoever. Halloween, he did not care, and has robbed the bank at A&M. All right, like, they had the best setup. You had it where Texas and Oklahoma weren't in the SEC. You were in the SEC way before them. So that's one playing field. You had the money behind you. You had the facilities. You had everything to be successful. You beat Nick Saban in Alabama, right? So you had all this hype coming into it. This is what's funny about the Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss rivalry that's kind of started there. I think Lane, and I've been saying this for a couple years now, Lane's still pushing and finding a way to stay in the good graces of Alabama fans, the organization and the University of Alabama, because he wants that Alabama job when Coach Saban decides to retire. It's the thing he's going to push for more than anything ever in his career. And people ask about it and he'll deny it, but that's what he wants more than anything. And the fact that Jimbo went at Saban a couple years ago at SEC Media Days, ever since then, Lane has gone at Jimbo on Twitter, social media, everything. So I still think Lane's playing into this hand of, hey, Alabama, see how I'm still taking care of you and everything? Like, when it comes up, I want that job.
AJ McCarron, busy preparing for NFL games and yet still keeping the third eye open. You love to see it. Coming up next here, our rivals that celebrate a little Halloween with some perfect SEC coaches and what they should dress up as this holiday season. We'll see you next here, our rivals. Hello there, and welcome back to Rivals Down South here on Watch Stadium, youtube.com/Watch Stadium. Nolan Hawley saying the kid's question was poorly asked. However, he treated Dabo poorly given what he's brought Clemson. Look, I agree. Tyler from Spartanburg was probably out of line, but Dabo doesn't need to pay attention to any of that crap. All right, AJ, it is Halloween, as you can tell, and we've got SEC coaches. We're going to try to give them their perfect costumes. Let's start with Nick Saban. I know what I have in mind. What did you have on your list?
For me, it'd be Batman, just because Batman always had the best technology, always had the best facilities, all the money to do whatever he wanted, and still got everything done.
I could see Nick Saban having like a bat cave in West Virginia somewhere that he goes back to. Look, Saban's Palpatine to me. For you Star Wars guys out there, all roads lead back to Palpatine. You saw Rise of Skywalker. It looks like once again all roads lead back to Nick Saban. What about Lane Kiffin, AJ?
Lane would be, for me, would be the Joker. Like he's always joking, he's never serious, and then all of a sudden, like he does something serious and it catches your eye, and you're like, oh, okay, well maybe this guy is real. So for me, it's got to be the Joker.
The pure agent of chaos. It makes all the sense in the world. The subtle trolls, the mercurial attitude. I'm with you. And then finally, the guy we just talked about. What about, as SEC Mike says, Jimbo Fisher?
Listen, Jimbo's got to be Robin. All right, it's the guy that wants to be friends with everybody, wants to be involved in everything. He tries to just insert himself in there, go out on his own and do something, and it's always a failure, and it comes back and it's like, all right, I'm sorry I let everybody down.
Yeah, and as you just alluded to, he is currently Robin, the Texas A&M Aggies. AJ, congrats on the big win. So glad to have you back. We'll see you later this week. We got more rivals coming tomorrow here on Watch Stadium. Happy Halloween.